Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Burns. Welcome to the Cleveland Metro Bar Association's afternoon discussion on elections during a pandemic. We have three fabulous speakers with us today. And before I introduce everyone, I just want to do one bit of housekeeping. We will be taking questions for this program. You can use the Q&A or chat function if you're watching via Zoom. If you're on Facebook Live, you can do it in the chat feature there. We will be saving questions till the end, though, because we have so much great information to get through. So type them in and we'll address them at the end. Our first speaker today is Ina Jo Davis-Chappelle. She's a Democratic appointee since April of 2007 at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. She is a partner at Ulmer & Byrne in Cleveland. Of course, we're here. She chairs the firm's nonprofit group. Her practice focuses on corporate, general business, and commercial real estate law. Ina Jo is named to the Ohio Super Lawyers list and was the best lawyer of the year in 2015 for nonprofit and charities law. She's an active civic and community volunteer. She serves on the boards of a number of nonprofit organizations and is a former member and chair of the Ohio Board of Voting Machine Examiners. Ina Jo holds a bachelor's degree from Yale University and a law degree from Columbia University. Our next speaker is Anthony Perlatti. He's the director of the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. Director Anthony Perlatti joined the Board of Elections as the Human Resources Manager in 2007 and was subsequently appointed to Deputy Director in February of 2013. Having 23 years of public service, 12 years devoted to the administration of the Board of Elections, he brings to the position of director extensive experience in planning, leadership, and high-quality service to the Board of Elections and to the public. And our third speaker today is Danielle Sydnor. She's the founder and CEO of We Win Strategies Group. This is a firm dedicated to working with a diverse array of stakeholders to create win-win outcomes for individuals, organizations, and communities. Danielle was most recently the executive director of Economic and Community Development Institute, Northern Ohio. It's a statewide CDFI, which Danielle, I apologize, I don't know what CDFI is. We'll let you explain that. Where she led a multi-city team and oversaw operations, fundraising, and stakeholder engagement. Danielle is the president for the Greater Cleveland branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. As president, Sydnor is responsible for fighting for the equality of rights of all persons with a focus on eliminating racial hatred and racial discrimination. And with that, I am going to start our PowerPoint. And Ina Jo, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Hey, great. First and foremost, thanks to Becky McMahon and to the Cleveland Metro Bar Association for inviting us to talk about a subject that's near and dear. Needless to say, there's a lot going on in terms of preparing for the general election, especially in this year of 2020. As it is with every general election, there's a lot to do and a lot going on, but it's even more challenging, as we all know, in the midst of a pandemic. So part of what we'd like to do today is enlist your help in ensuring a smooth election by serving as poll workers, and more to come on that. We always ask that you serve as ambassadors for enfranchisement of voters and for our Board of Elections. At this time, I just want to hit the first slide because I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. If we could have the next slide, I just want to show you these pre-pandemic pictures of voting in general elections. So the top left picture is a 2016 picture of our headquarters on Election Day. This is Election Day voting, so it was most likely the day or so before Election Day. Right below that left bottom picture, it's a 2008 general election cycle, and you can see the lines on each side of the street wrapped around East 30th Street, leading up to our building on Euclid, and those lines were wrapped around almost to the end of the street by Chester, if you know the area, and around the corner. Top right and top bottom are 2018 pictures of in-house voting. The picture inside of the Board of Elections, and then again, lines outside, again, those two pictures from 2018. These are pre-pandemic, so, we just want to emphasize, we are facing a significant challenge because of the number of voters we expect in the general. We always expect, but at this time, we know that the lines are going to be long. The time it will take us to social distance, you see there's no social distancing in that one top right picture. The time it's going to take us to sanitize the equipment after each voter means that there are going to be lines. So we are going to have to manage that message, but give the assurance that we are committed to making sure that each voter is able to vote safely if they choose to do so in person. Of course, we are encouraging vote by mail. We've always done that to maximize voter safety. I always have to just give a quick disclaimer. I am but one board member. There are 4 board members that comprise our Board of Elections. So what I may say here reflects my view, but I can tell you, I do speak on behalf of the entire board when I say that we are committed to running a successful election for 2020, that we are committed to bipartisanship, which is the hallmark of the work that we do, frankly, at the Board of Elections. And we're committed to administering a free, fair election, and we are hoping that you will join us as we move forward to the 2020 election. So with that introduction, again, thanks for being here, thanks for listening, and I'll kick it over to Tony Perlatti, our director. Oh, I should say, just quickly, our conversation is going to focus on these 3 items. Core election information, just to give you guys some voter awareness, how precinct election officials help us as we administer elections, and then the process that will be used if you choose to join us and serve as precinct election officials. So thank you. Tony.
Thank you, Anna Jo, and hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today to learn about this very important election that we have coming up. And so as an election administrator, one of the things that I'm tasked with and working with the staff is preparing for this election, which is like trying to complete a complex puzzle. You have all these different pieces that you're trying to fit together to ultimately create your final product, which is a successful election. And so, what this slide is showing you is some of the numbers that we have to focus on. So Cuyahoga County, while we are not the largest county in the state by population, we do have the most registered voters in the state. And so we have almost 900,000 registered voters. And so we have to figure out how do we afford all these individuals access to the voting process in a free and transparent manner. Cuyahoga County is made up of 59 municipalities. So that means that we need to work with 59 different mayors, 59 city councils to try to work to make this election work in all those different municipalities. The Board of Elections is tasked with creating precincts, and precincts are the smallest official group of voters grouped together. In our county, we have 975 precincts. So we take those 900,000 registered voters and get them placed into these 975 precincts. And then we take the precincts and we have to assign them to polling locations. As of right now, we have 298 polling locations, and that's what we were planned on using this past spring. But as we know, that election was extended and there was no in-person voting at the polls. One of the biggest challenges we have is finding polling locations that are good polling locations that are accessible to the voters within their neighborhood. We have to, before we can identify a polling location, that site has to pass a 20+ page ADA assessment to make sure that anyone who needs assistance getting the polling place can do that on their own. And this is criteria that's established by the Secretary of State. So it's a very difficult task. And now when you do this in a pandemic environment, it becomes even more challenging because you need more space to do that. Ultimately, to execute that election, we're going to have to recruit 4,000 precinct election officials or poll workers, and then assign them to these 298 locations into precincts. And so that is a challenge that we'll talk a little bit more later on and how you can help us meet that. But overall, what we try to do is we try to keep our poll places consistent. We try to rehire as many poll workers as we can to have a good product on election day, but always infusing new individuals into the process. And also you'll see on the side of this slide is kind of a snapshot of what the breakdown of registered voters currently look like in Cuyahoga County and what it's looked like over the last 3 presidential elections. While it does say just over 861,000 registered voters, by the time the close of registration comes October 5th, that number will reach about 900,000. Okay, let's go on to slide number 5, please. So election administrators are relying on historical data to prepare for future elections. However, there is no historical data that exists on conducting a presidential election during a pandemic. So what we do is we try to make educated guesses and try to do the best we can to figure this out. So we're definitely in some uncharted territory here as we go forward. But so what we do is we kind of start off though what we typically would do. And what we would do in a non-pandemic situation is we would anticipate about 70% of the registered voters, so 70% of those 900,000 registered voters would participate in the election. And we can see that that's similar to what it was in 16 and 12. So that's what we're starting as our base point. So we anticipate we'll get that, but we also hear about record turnout. So what we're doing at this point is anticipating a 75% turnout for this November to make sure that we have enough supplies and staffing to meet our goals. And hopefully we get to that, because ultimately you would want your number to be 100%, but I don't know if we're able to get to that number. On the other side of the slide, you see comparison on voter turnout by different voting methods, being by mail and early in person and on election day. And so what you see is that typically you have one that is more popular to utilize by voters than others, which is election day voting, with vote by mail coming in second. What we're doing though to plan for this upcoming election is we believe that vote by mail will be very strong, stronger than it already is or typically is in an election. And so we think that the election day turnout, we could see that for vote by mail. So as we prepare for this election, we will kind of use that as a gauge to be able to make sure that we're able to execute this election successful, no matter what type of method people use to vote, and account for increased turnout in different types of elections. But what is interesting over time is that we kind of have a similar turnout in similar type elections. However, what we find is that the people change the method in which they vote. So maybe we will have 70% turnout again this fall, but what we might see is that instead of maybe 60% voting at the polls and 40% by mail, those numbers will flip-flop, not necessarily change. And we've kind of seen that over the years, again, when you compare similar type elections, meaning even years, odd years, primaries, and generals. So, okay, let's go on to slide 6, please. Okay, so the previous chart kind of showed what the 3 methods of voting are, but those voting methods are vote by mail, early in person, and election day at the polls. And these are 3 methods that the Ohio Revised Code calls for, and this is uniform across all 88 counties. So boards of elections in the different counties don't get to choose what types of methods they want to implement. It is uniform across the state. And like we kind of saw in the previous chart, in Cuyahoga County, voting by mail is the second most popular method of voting, with usually 30 to 40% of the individuals using that. However, we're very proud that Cuyahoga County, year after year, has the greatest vote by mail participation among voters out of all 88 counties. So we lead the way, and we lead the way by quite a large portion or margin. Early in-person voting, that is the voting that is least utilized here in Cuyahoga County, and that's where people come to our offices to vote. But we are second in the state in administering the numbers of people who vote early in person, second only to Franklin County. And the last method is election day at the polls, and this is the most utilized voting method in all 88 counties. And so what our goal is, hopefully for this November 3rd, is we actually hope here in Cuyahoga County that we kind of flip the preferences, and that more voters choose to vote by mail in November than on election day. Okay, let's go to slide 7, please. Excuse me. Okay, so vote by mail. Vote by mail is a multi-step process, and it starts in meaning that you have to do 2 things. You have to request the application and complete that application and then send that back to us. And when you do that, then we can go ahead and mail you a ballot when that time happens. So this is what kind of confused a lot of voters this past spring. So people who have voted by mail for years and years, they know the process. And most of those people in the spring had requested their vote by mail and voted their ballot by March 17th. It was post March 17th up until April 28th where a lot of the confusion happened. And those were typically your individuals who vote at the polls on election day and have never really paid much attention or know what the rules were regarding vote by mail. And so it's this multi-step where they thought in doing just part 1 that they were done. Well, that wasn't the case. So we want to make sure that we educate individuals as we promote a greater vote by mail turnout, that it is a multi-step process. And the good thing is that that multi-step process can start now. So there is a deadline to turn in your application, which is 12 noon on the Saturday before election day, but that's too late. You shouldn't do that. We already have almost 40,000 individuals who have submitted applications and we have processed them. And we are, when you compare, again, we talk about doing comparisons when we work in election administration. When we looked at 2016, we're about a month ahead. So that is good. I think we will have a more robust vote by mail from that. But again, we need to make sure everyone understands it's a 2-step process. They can do step 1 now, which is request their application, and they can do that from us. They can either print it or we'll mail it, and they send that back, and then they just wait. And then we'll mail them a ballot on October 6th when we're first allowed to do that. Like I said, vote by mail applications can and should be requested now. And October 6th, this is where people need to understand also, we're not allowed to mail until that date, and that's uniform across the state. So regardless if you turn your application in at the beginning of the year or right before October 6th, that is the first time in which we can mail ballots. And again, uniform across all 88 counties. And what's great here for us is in Ohio, since 2005, we've had what's called no fault vote by mail or no excuse vote by mail. So that means that all you do is fill out this application and you're able to participate in that method of voting, where prior to 2005, you had to provide a reason or an excuse, such as you're going to be on vacation on election day and weren't able to go to the polls. Well, that's been removed, and that's good for us. It makes it much easier. And it is a very simple, secure, and I personally think the most convenient option for voters. They do it from their home. They do it in their kitchen with a laptop, researching the issues and the candidates, and they can make a very informed decision. And they can do that at their own pace. If they're a morning person, night person, doesn't matter, because they're not constricted by the hours of voting on election day. Okay. Also, I want to point out on this slide, you'll see in the top right corner, there's something called Vote from Home. And that's a widget that we're pushing out for the first time this upcoming election. And we're branding our vote by mail as Vote from Home. And that's because through this pandemic, we are all doing more and more things from home, shopping, and we don't get out of the house as much as we do. So why not vote also from home? So you're there and you do that. And so, one of the great things about voting from home is that you don't have to worry about this, come election day, the status of the pandemic, what the weather is outside, waiting in line at the polls, because you can take care of this all from the safety and the convenience of your home. So that is something that we want you to take advantage of. Also, I want to point out, when it comes to vote by mail, we hear a lot of things about the post office, and I want to let everyone know that Cuyahoga County, our Board of Elections, has had a good and long-standing relationship with the post office. We meet with them multiple times throughout the years to discuss processes and conversations that other boards of elections are now having with the post office. We started having those conversations years ago. So we do have this good, strong relationship with them. A lot of times we don't see or encounter some of the issues that we see other counties having. And I think it's because of this partnership and the respect that we have for the post office and they have for what we do. In fact, we've worked with the post office in the past to be innovative. And on our return ballot envelopes, the post office puts what's an intelligent barcode. It looks like a little fluorescent marking on there. And so we met with them years ago to figure out what is that? What information is contained within there? And we have learned that you can get a processing date from that intelligent barcode that's on the machine. You can scan that. So what we did is we developed a process in which if we're not able to clearly see a postmark on an envelope, we can scan that, and the information we obtain from that, we can use that to determine if a ballot is returned timely or not. It was such a good innovation that we created that in fact the Secretary of State now requires all 88 counties to use this process, to have a scanner, scan these intelligent barcodes if a pre-printed postmark is not on the envelope, so we can, in an effort to count as many ballots as possible into our certification numbers. So vote by mail is something that we do very well, and I would say we do that the best in the state. I don't know if anyone has any other comments on that. If not, we'll go on to the next slide. Okay.
Are we going to have Danielle hop in and give us her thoughts around what she's seeing in terms of vote by mail or any of on the street, what's going on with some of the comments, myths, questions that people have around vote by mail? And I think that there's actually a couple of questions that I've seen pop up, but we'll talk about them at the end, unless Danielle, you see them and you want to address.
Yeah, so thank you, Anna Jo. I think that Anthony, what you laid out in terms of how folks up here have traditionally engaged with voting is something that we saw really play out in the primary. You know, a lot of our community is very dedicated to showing up and going to the polls and exercising that right to do in-person voting. And as we really grappled with a kind of a last-minute decision to make our primary a 100% vote by mail for those that still were trying to do it in person, it did become very confusing, even with the information coming out from different levels of government. And I was hearing things in the national media that conflicted with what I knew was happening on the ground. So I really appreciate forums like this to get in front of lots of well-intentioned people that can now pass the message on accurately into the communities that you live, work, and play. And so the NAACP definitely sees a lot of confusion, even around the language of vote by mail, early voting, absentee voting. And what we're really trying to do is use our perch in the community to be a voice for people to hear accurate and fair, and correct information. The concerns about what happens when they put their ballot in the mail, how they track it, we definitely are just trying to reassure people that there is a process to be able to track their application. There's a process to track the ballot. They have the ability to go turn it in person, at the Board of Elections. There's just so much education that we're trying to do about the process itself, in addition to the education about voting and the importance of voting. And so we're really finding our niche in this space around getting folks registered, but really doing a lot of the education about all of the options that they will have to make sure that they can safely exercise their right to vote this election cycle, where maybe in the past, we might not have put as much of an emphasis on vote by mail. We always made folks know it was an option, but now we're really reinforcing the fact that our local systems are not going to be able to handle the volume of people that might have traditionally shown up at the polls to no fault of their own, just because of the pandemic and the extra precautions that will be necessary. So we know there's a bit of a heavy lift to get our community convinced that it's safe, especially with some of the attacks that we continue to see about what vote by mail actually is. It's really important that we continue to use forums like this to get out good, fair, and accurate information.
Yeah. I just want to add, there's been a couple of questions come up, and we are going to talk a bit about the drive to the drop box, the singular drop box in our parking lot at 30th and Euclid a little later in the presentation. But in terms of vote by mail, there's a question about branding, what we are going to do. Tony talked about the vote from home branding we're going to do, and also just in terms of tracking, we used to actually have a really nifty tool, Voter Notify, where voters could actually track their ballots at each step of the, of the movement of the ballots. We had to discontinue that program because of some cybersecurity issues, and frankly, it was a great tool, and people did seem to enjoy just being able to get a text or email to determine where their ballot was. But we're looking at some other options for tracking the ballots. And then just finally, I think we just are trying to be cautious in terms of rolling out our messaging just yet, because there's additional information that is going to come down the pike. We don't want to rush to deliver too much information because we don't want there to be voter confusion. So we're being very intentional about the manner in which we identify and distribute information to the voter. We are running out of time. We want people to make some decisions so we can move forward. But just wanted to answer those couple of questions on vote by mail and tracking of ballots before we move on to early in person. I know we have to speed it up a little bit to allow for questions at the end. So. Tony, I think you have early in person at election days.
So early in person, so we do expect and anticipate tens of thousands of individuals choosing this option for this fall. In 2019, there was a legislative change that happened that makes this method of voting similar to that on election day, where previously it was basically doing your vote by mail process, but you didn't fix a stamp or take your ballot to the post office. You just dropped it in a box here at the polls. So now that is different, and it does mimic election day, where you show an ID, get your ballot, and you ultimately put it into a scanner when you're leaving to go out the door. It starts on October 6th and it ends on November 2nd. So basically 4 weeks, but the hours and days do vary from week to week. And so our website is the best place to get that information for what is going on at what point in time. There are 2 sets of weekends in a presidential general, the 2 weekends, the Saturday and Sunday, leading up to election day. Those weekends will be open for voting. The thing about early in-person voting is that we have all the ballots for the entire county, for all 975 precincts. So anyone can come to this location within the county, and we can service them and provide them with a ballot. What's nice is this year we remodeled the room. So now we have a much bigger, open, brighter, new room for people to come and vote. So it is a good option for individuals to come to our building and take advantage of this. All right, let's go on to the next slide, which is election day voting. Now, election day voting, everyone's familiar with that. You go to your polling location in your neighborhood. Polls are open from 6:30 to 7:30 on election day, but you have to go to your specific location and vote there. And that is, you're assigned that. You can find that out on our website, but we also mail out a card before every election reminding everyone where they're supposed to go. Now, what is important is that if someone does not update their voter registration, so they're registered, but they move and haven't updated it by the October 5th deadline, they will be required to vote a provisional ballot, which will update their address. If you do that, don't go back to your previous polling location. Find out and call us, and we'll help you out to where your new address, where that resides, because that's where you want to go, and that's where you want to cast your ballot. So that is important to do that, to cast a successful ballot on election day. I will say this will be the most challenging method of voting for us to figure out and execute in a pandemic because of social distancing, and just we don't know what to expect, and it's reliant on poll workers. So that is the main things on election day voting. Okay, let's go to our next slide. So this is something that we hear a lot about in the news. What is the difference between vote by mail and absentee? And sometimes we hear one method is better than the other. Well, actually, really here in Ohio, there's only two types of voting. You vote at the polls on election day, so in person at the polls, or you vote absentee. So that's what you do here in Ohio. Now, absentee consists of a couple different parts. You have vote by mail, which we talked about, where you're doing that from your home. And then we have early in person, which is the other half of absentee. There are other things such as nursing home voting and hospital voting for certain populations, but that all falls under absentee. So when you hear, you know, is there a difference? Well, no, vote by mail is part of absentee. So when you're voting by mail, you are voting absentee. So.
You know, we've been hearing some language, just to jump in real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not muted. We've been hearing some language about universal mail, you know, those kinds of, and I think what people are misconstruing, and maybe what Danielle's alluding to a little bit, our Secretary of State, you know, made a determination, and it's a great thing, to send, you know, vote by mail applications to all registered voters. And some people are construing the actions of the secretaries of state across the country in sending out those, universally sending out those vote by mail applications to registered voters as universal mail. I think that's a little bit of what how people are interpreting that. But as a practical, and frankly, there may be voters who have requested a vote by mail application and who will also receive one from the Secretary of State. And then we'll have two. I've already gotten questions from folks, and maybe Danielle, you have two. Why do I have two sets of applications? So, you know, we don't want to have confusion, but we do want to definitely be encouraging that our voters take advantage of vote by mail. So. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so I just want to quickly talk about, you know, somebody's saying, you know, this is awful that we only have this one location where people can vote early and in person, and it is awful. We wish we could expand the opportunities for folks to come and vote early and in person at more than one location, given the size of our county. But this limitation on voting in person, early in person, is codified in the Ohio Revised Code at section 3501.10c. And the statute is limiting in a proviso. Language is there that says, you know, we as a Board of Election can have temporary offices and allow voting at any place where we have offices, provided that we're only permitted to have electors vote essentially where we have early in person, where we have our headquarters. So in effect, early in-person voting is restricted to one location for all counties, regardless of their size. It makes no sense for us in Cuyahoga County, and we've been asking that the legislature take a look at making some change there. But this is a codified provision in the Ohio statute that limits us to one location for early in-person voting.
The next question is, why doesn't the Board of Elections have multiple ballot drop boxes to collect vote by mail ballots throughout the county? And again, it seems like it's a common sense solution, especially something as large as Cuyahoga County, but the Secretary of State has interpreted the revised code to show that each of the 88 Ohio counties can only have one secure drop box, and that secure drop box needs to be at that early voting location that Ina Jo was talking about. So there has been a lot of discussion about having multiple drop boxes, and within the past weeks, Secretary of State LaRose did ask or request a formal opinion of Attorney General Yost on, is it allowable to have multiple drop boxes, is, you know, get a better interpretation of what the code says. And then we're waiting for what Attorney General Yost decides. Now, if he does come back and he says that it is allowable to have multiple drop boxes, well, then what will happen is the Secretary of State will have to draft and pen a directive and issue that to the 88 boards of elections, giving us the rules and criteria for multiple drop boxes, whatever they may be. And once we have that, then as a board, Ina Jo and the other 3 board members will have a meeting to discuss the number drop boxes, the placement, all depending on what that directive allows for. We need a decision soon because drop boxes aren't things that are on a shelf. You have to order those and they're made for production. And really, from what we found, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks lead time for them to be built by a manufacturer and delivered. So we are coming to a point where that 6 to 8 really impacts the early voting window.
Okay. May I deliver my, Danielle, are you covering this particular one, or where are we on the, may I deliver my?
So,
okay.
Yeah, may I deliver my neighbor's vote by mail ballot to the Board of Elections? This is always a fun one. No, voters may not deliver, voters can deliver their own vote by mail ballot, but you cannot have somebody else that's not a family member deliver the vote by mail ballot to the Board of Elections. So I'm going to just read it so for clarity, and then I'll expound upon it a little bit. So voters may deliver their own voted ballot or have a family member deliver their voted ballot to the Board of Elections by the close of polls, 7:30 p.m. on Election Day. This family member is defined in the Ohio Revised Code as the spouse of the elector, the father, mother, father-in-law, mother-in-law, grandfather, grandmother, brother, or sister of the whole or half blood, or the son, daughter, or adopting. The one, I think, piece of information that also confuses people a little bit is that you can have someone else turn in your vote by mail application, but not the actual ballot. And so we have experienced that quite a bit. We did a vote by mail drive during the primary, and we had someone that drove up and was like, oh, I can drop my ballot off to you guys. We're like, no, we cannot take your ballot. Go ahead and drive that down to the Board of Elections yourself. But vote by mail applications can be collected. And I know I saw a question in here about the USPS and individuals that may not be able to get to the drop box. And so you will see a number of community groups that are doing vote by mail application drives, because we can be out in the community helping folks fill out their vote by mail application and turn them in, you know, on their behalf. But the actual ballot itself, very limited, narrow window of who can turn it in besides the elector.
Yeah, not to scare anybody, but I mean, the Chapter 35 at the end has all kinds of penalties around interference with conduct of election, tampering with ballots, and that language, you know, those are 5th-degree felonies, and that language, you know, nobody's intending to violate the law. I think most people just don't understand that, you know, and most people are being helpful, but there really is a prohibition on, you know, bringing other people's ballots to the Board of Elections unless you're in one of these family member category. So. Yeah, I mean, there's some questions that are coming up around whether a voter's legal guardian can turn in a ballot. I mean, you know, as a lawyer, I would say, you know, I mean, this is off the cuff here, so I would assume that a legal guardian stands in loco parentis, so there could be a really good argument that would qualify as a family member. You know, I do think, you know, some of these questions are very specific, as it, you know, many of the issues we deal with are very fact specific. So, you know, please shoot those to us, you know, separately. But I think, you know, the general rule needs to be complied with. We've actually had a couple of hearings where challenges have been made, and we've had to instruct very well-intended people that they have actually violated the law by bringing other people's ballots to the Board of Elections. So just something to be mindful of. We'll go to the next slide, because I think we want to try to move this. You know, we could have like 5 sessions on elections in Chapter 35, and so, you know, I don't mean to rush us, but we do want to get to your questions. But I think some of the questions are answered in the substantive program that we've prepared. Just a quick reminder, and we're so appreciative that the Ohio Supreme Court on July 22nd actually waived the standard provisions of the continuing legal education requirements and issued an order that basically allows attorneys to serve as precinct election officials because of the deficiency in Ohio and potential scarcity of those poll workers due to COVID-19. And so they've actually ordered that attorneys and judges can serve on election day and receive up to 4 hours of CLE credit. So we're very appreciative of that. And we're hopeful that this order and the group we're talking to here today, but that more and more lawyers and judges will agree to serve as poll workers on election day. So kudos to the Ohio Supreme Court and to our Secretary of State who pushed for that initiative. So we should move to the next slide.
So as Anna Jo said, there is now the ability, the program for all 88 counties for attorneys to earn for CLEs for serving as a poll worker. And it's something that here in Cuyahoga County, we definitely we want to recruit and have as many attorneys as we can work as precinct election officials on election day out in the polls. And we have in the past, we've had attorneys work the polls, and they've been very beneficial. And we've actually, in either other years, we've had some attorneys come from out of state who they couldn't work as poll workers because they weren't a registered voter of Cuyahoga County, but they helped with phone banking and other things. And what we found is, there's just a skill set, a level of common sense and ability to work through difficult issues quickly that attorneys have, and not that others don't have it, but it's very beneficial on when you get to election day and that one day. And what we envision and would hope to be, and what we've kind of done so far up to this point, is when we do have attorneys, we try to get them into a management role within the polling location to help keep order, answer questions of the poll workers in there to keep things moving along. Have a little bit more of a role in the provisional voting process. It's not a difficult process, but it is a little bit different than your standard check-in. So we want to ensure that everyone is getting that right ballot and is correctly voting provisional if they need to. So we want that help with that. And then from time to time, and more so in a presidential election, you do get some overzealous observers who are really excited to be there, and they have a right to be there. However, they have some rules and they need to stay in their areas and watch the process. And now with social distancing, they really need to be mindful of where they are in the poll place. And we believe that our attorney poll workers can help keep those individuals, communicate with them in a way, a professional manner, so everyone is happy. For those of you who maybe, we did have a CLE program in the spring here in Cuyahoga County. We're the only county to get approved for that. It's a little bit different than what it is now. So in the spring, it was a unique class that individuals had to attend. It was actually down at the Cleveland Bar Association, and the format was a little bit different. Now, what is good and what's changed is that has been lifted, and it's our standard poll worker training that people attend. I think it's a little bit more convenient and easier for individuals to get there to participate.
Before you move on to the next slide, I just wanted to I know we said we were going to answer questions at the end, but I've been receiving them and responding. I just wanted to say one of a person in the audience made note of the fact that accountants also get continuing education credit for serving as poll workers. And we should note that social workers just recently have been given authority to receive credit for serving as poll workers. And Tony may want to share the fact that the county just took really good action to release county employees to be able to serve without losing any pay. And so, and I know you're going to expand on that, but for these reasons, we feel fairly confident that we will get to the number of recruited poll workers that we need. I know you're going to talk about the county program as well, but somebody did recognize that accountants, lawyers, and now social workers also can serve. We want everybody. So yes. Thanks for those comments. Yeah.
Yes, we do. All right, so let's go to slide 14. So one of the big concerns that we have, or that everyone has, is how do I work the polls and stay safe? How do we keep voters safe? And we're putting a lot of effort into this to ensure that that happens, because we ask you to come help us work as a poll worker on election day, and these are some of the things that we want to do to ensure your safety. So we have been procuring a lot of the personal protective equipment, the PPE, and we're ready to outfit polling locations with certain items. So for poll workers themselves, we have disposable masks that we'll be issuing to each of those workers. They'll have face shields that they can wear, safety goggles if they want those instead of the shields, gloves, Every check-in station will have hand sanitizer. So that was what the poll workers will have. We'll have masks available for voters if they forget to bring one to the poll place on election day. And we also will be cleaning the poll place throughout the day. So we're sending out spray bottles of rubbing alcohol to spray down surfaces. It's a quick drying item that we can keep the poll workers or keep the place clean and people going through. Floor markings, so people know where 6 feet is. Door stops, so we can keep doors open so people don't have to touch the handles. And other things that we're trying to do to make it a safe environment for the poll workers as well as the voters. We're even going to things like the electronic poll book. A styli will be available and we'll clean it in between voters, but we found that with a simple Kleenex that we'll provide, or basically a rubber tip finger they can put on, you can sign with that, keeps people from touching these common surfaces. And then they'll throw them out, they'll be single use. We even have bought over 400,000 pens. So everyone gets their own pen, they mark the ballot, they take it with them. We don't want it back. Because that's just cleaner and more sanitary environment. We created a new position called a sanitation election official, where their whole job all day is just to walk around and spray down surfaces, encourage people to be socially distant, and we make sure to help that we have a good, safe, successful election day. So this is something that we put a lot of effort and safety into it. We'll be training poll workers on what the expectations are. We'll be training through educational pieces voters on what our expectations of them are and what they can do to make sure that this is a safe day for everyone. So no one gets turned away on election day, so we need to have things in place to ensure that they can go ahead and vote in a clean, safe environment.
You know, the one thing that came up on a prior question, well, 2 other questions that came up on, one was, you know, whether vote by mail tabulation occurs upon receipt of those ballots, and it does not. We are not permitted to open we are not permitted to count or tabulate vote by mail ballots until the polls close. One thing I wanted to mention is for our poll workers that are planning to, and all of you that are planning to work with us, you know, I have, and this is my personal belief, every expectation that the polls are going to have to stay open longer. Whether or not we're called to court and somebody secures a court order to get the polls to stay open longer, we often tell voting groups and others, hey, you know, we want people to vote at the Board of Elections. So, you know, call us up and tell us you're marching over to court. We'll march over there with you because we definitely are going to have an issue with given the social distancing. In all likelihood, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that we will not likely need to have the polls stay open longer. There used to be a time where we could, at 7:30, you know, if there were a few people hanging out the door, bring everybody in, close the door and comply with the law, but allow everybody to vote. But obviously, because of social distancing, we're not going to be able to do that. So we do expect there's probably going to be an issue around extending the time for closing of the polls. I don't know that, that's just my opinion, but we will be looking to take steps to try to address that situation. I think that was, we've kind of covered, you know, what happens if we don't hire our 4,000 election officials, but I don't know, Tony, if you wanted to offer some comments on that, in addition to what I've shared.
So just, not very much at all, but just like Anna Jo said, the county executive and county council just passed a program where county employees can now work the polls and get paid by the county for that as well as ours. That's something that's going to help us meet this goal of 4,000. All of you signing up to be poll workers will help us meet that. We need you to do that. And really, it's this number of polling locations that determine, or number of poll workers, if we're able to open a location on election day or not. We will have the locations, but if I don't have the bodies, I can't open it. So I need everyone to step up and do their part to make sure that happens, because if not, we are shutting down locations, redirecting poll workers, but we won't know that until within the 2 weeks before an election, and that just creates confusion. So by you signing up, it makes us get that 4,000 number, and if by chance we don't, you, because of the skill set you have, will help us to work through issues that could arise if we do have to close a few locations and redirect workers. So please, 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 we need your help.
One of the things that we may want to mention too is that as an incentive to help our poll worker recruitment, we have been able to get the county to authorize an increase of pay for election day. And so we're hoping that that will be helpful in getting folks to, along with the protections that we plan to provide for all our poll workers and staff, to encourage people that it is safe to come, and we do really need them to come and help us administer the election. Danielle, you unmuted. I didn't know if you wanted to chime in there.
Yeah, I just had, maybe Anthony, if you could elaborate at all on criteria for poll workers. I know that question has come up a bit in circles that I'm in. If you could maybe high level talk about what someone needs to be to try and apply for that position.
So what someone needs, a successful poll worker is someone who has a good work ethic, someone who has good customer service skills, someone who has a sense of civic responsibility, and someone who can learn what needs to be done. We train everyone. So you don't need to have any kind of elections experience prior to this. We teach you everything you need to know. And we provide you so we provide you with that classroom instruction, but then also on election day, we create quick reference guides. So all your key functions that you have, you'll have a 1-sheet paper, actually it's 11 by 17, that outlines how do you get through that task. So we provide all these tools in order to get all these different tasks done. We have a lot of returning poll workers, so you have this combination of new and returning, so you have some institutional knowledge there at the poll places. But really, we provide those tools. You have to be a people person, able to communicate with people, and if you can do that, you can be successful. And so really, there's not a special skill set. However, we talked about the attorneys, and those are the ones, though, who we look for to more so. Again, it's those qualities that they have to be able to make decisions in a thought-out manner, lead the poll place, manage it. You know, that helps out too.
Yeah, and that skill set is not unique to
It is correct.
So we certainly are welcoming everybody who has a desire to who is civic minded, and you have to complete the training, and we're happy to train everybody so that they feel comfortable. The bipartisan teams that are at the polling locations, to Tony's point, will have some seasoned poll workers, so there will be some institutional knowledge there, and so nobody will feel lost, and we don't subscribe to the sink or swim theory, although we like to think everybody's swimming, everybody's front crawling. These are some of the hardest working, poll workers are some of the hardest working people that we've seen. It's a long day, but I'm told very rewarding, and it's very helpful to us. Somebody's asked a question about whether or not how we assign poll workers. We try to accommodate preference to get people in their neighborhoods. And so we do make that effort, but we can't always do it. And so we're hopeful that people will be willing to be deployed throughout the county if possible. But we do make an effort to have people work in their neighborhoods and their communities. So
let's look at this last slide real quick, because this is going to show you where you go to apply. So you go to our website, 443vote.us. At the bottom of this slide, you see a button. You click on that button, and what it'll do is it'll take you to a simple application where you're putting in, it'll take you to a screen where there is an option that says poll worker, and it also says attorney poll worker. You want to click on attorney poll worker. You fill in the information such as your name and address, that good information, but also there's a spot for your attorney ID number, which we need in order to give you the CLE credits. So you go through that process, simple process. We'll notify you that we received your application, and then you'll get another link from us later on that will allow you to self-sign up for a training class. So you go to the training class, new worker, it's about 3.5 hours. And again, we teach everything you need to know. And then you'll be notified that what your final assignment is. The Monday before, you go to the polling location for about 2 hours, 6 p.m. to 8. That's to do a pre-setup, get the voting booths up. So when you come back on Tuesday morning on election day, everything is pretty much in place, and all you're doing is taking the ballots out, setting them up on the table, getting the electronic poll book ready to go to check people in, and then you're off to working for the day. This is a paid position. Attorneys make $275. And to do that, you have to attend training, go Monday night, and work all day at the polls. In addition to that, those are the 3 criteria that are needed in order to get your 4 CLE credits. So not only are you doing a good civic duty, but there are CLEs and $275 to be had for helping us get through this important presidential election.
There was a question that popped up. I know that poll workers who've served with us previously used to be able to do, and perhaps still can, just do virtual online training. What about new poll workers, Tony? What's our protocol going to be in the pandemic for new new recruits?
Right. So the Secretary of State actually provided us with guidance on this. So a new worker is required to attend an in-person training class. And that's so they can actually get their hands on a poll book and see how to use that tool. A returning poll worker, the Secretary of State has allowed us to do online virtual training, and we will be rolling that out for our returning workers. So if you are a returning attorney, you still go ahead and sign up, and you'll have the virtual online training piece, but still get the same CLE credits and pay.
Danielle, did you have any thought before we conclude and take formal questions? Any thoughts about the work you're doing and for the group?
Yeah, no, I just think that the desire that I have is that we have more folks that are out here spreading good information, and that while many people are looking for that one kind of silver bullet to get us to a fair and decent election in November, I think it's going to be incumbent upon all of us to be doing our parts in the community to be spreading good information. We are definitely looking for folks that would be interested in serving as election protection officials. So the NAACP, in partnership with All Voting is Local, has generally been the hub for election protection on election day. Just a phone bank of folks that would be able to answer calls from individuals that may show up at the polls and find out that their polling location has been moved, or they may have issues while they're attempting to vote. And so if you're interested in doing that, you can get in contact with us at the NAACP. I'll put my contact information in the chat as well. You also can just reach out to us via email, which is clevelandbranchnaacp@gmail.com, or find our website. It's all out there. But we will be recruiting folks for election protection as well. It's not complicated. It's really easy to be able to just go through the virtual training that we'll offer and just be a voice to kind of answer questions and direct folks to the right place. But I just thank everybody again for participating and look forward to the questions.
Okay. We did get some contact information requests that our contact information and the slide deck be provided. So Carrie, we're going to ask you if there's a way that you can get that to the participants on the call and on Facebook as well. So
yes, absolutely. We will send all the information out via email after this program has concluded. We did a pretty good job of getting to most of the questions. Thank you, Ina Jo. And I was manning the slide, so I'm looking quickly.
There was one about high school workers and training of high schoolers for poll workers. I don't know, Tony, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we have typically used student poll workers. We want to do it again this upcoming fall. We're going to try. It's going to be a little bit different though, because with most schools starting the first quarter remotely, we're going to have to be creative in communicating with schools to get in touch with those students and recruit them. So that's something that we haven't dove deep into at this point, because we know the schools right now are just trying to figure out how to execute online learning for the students, but we will be getting back in there, and we do need them. They're great. They're good with technology and electronic poll books, so we hope to have them. It just be a little bit different approach to figure out how to get them, to identify them with them not being in the physical classroom.
To the extent that we have advocates on the line that, to the point about the decision on drop boxes, we do need to get some finality and some final decisions made on a lot of these issues quickly, because we do have to implement and execute the decision. And, we are going to be spreading messaging to the voting public, but we don't want to do it too quickly, because the worst thing for us to do is disseminate information and then have to walk it back. And the thing we want to avoid is voter confusion. So we do appreciate you guys being great ambassadors for us. We're thanking you in advance and thanking you for joining up to be poll workers, signing up.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for participating today. We appreciate the information and the knowledge that you all have. Obviously, we need to do another one of these. We had a question about internet hacking and voting machines. We didn't even touch on that, and that's a whole nother ball of wax. So we will have to bring you back before November. Thank you again. We will send the information out to those who participate or who viewed today. We'll send the slides and contact information. Thank you all again for being here today, and stay tuned for more programs to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.